I would like to introduce to you our first speakers. So this is Helen and Richard. They're from the University of West of England, and they would like to share their experiences of using virtual reality in crime scene investigation with you. I'll let them do their introductions and they'll give you much more detail as well as the information on their recent publication. So I'm just going to send Helen live now.
Thank you very much. Good morning, everybody. My name is Helen Green and I'm Associate Head of Department at University of West of England, and I oversee all the forensic courses at UWE. I also am Programme Leader for a new Master's course that we have just started to run as well. I'd like to introduce my colleague here, Rich Mayne, who is no longer working with us, unfortunately, at UWE, but was part of our team there for a few years. He now runs his own company called Mayne Bioanalytics, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit today about our presentation relating to a paper that we published quite recently on the use of virtual reality in using, for crime scene investigation. So, as you may be aware, there are quite a number of challenges relating to teaching and learning in forensic science. It would be fantastic if we could give our students numerous amounts of practice at processing a crime scene individually. It would be really good if they could have, more than one attempt to be able to do that, be able to go in and process the crime scene, looking at their ability to hypothesize, prioritise and collect the evidence. But unfortunately, it proves quite a challenge to be able to do that numerous times. So, for example, let me just give you an indication of the number of students we have at UE. So at level 3, we have 60 students. At level 4, we have 90 students. At level 5, we have 60 students. And level 6, we have another 60 students. And then at level 7, we have 42 students. So you can imagine trying to be able to accommodate all those students and get them, to practice the crime scene investigation, as well as to be able to do an assessment, is quite time consuming, it's quite laborious for staff, and also booking the space and the time out is quite tricky to do that. And I'm not sure whether you're aware at the moment, it's really, really difficult to get hold of PPE at the moment and consumables. And the price seems to have rocketed as well. So taking all that into account and looking at trying to minimise our carbon footprint with things like packaging, quite a lot of plastic waste and things like that, without giving the experience of the students of that real thinking through of the hypothesising of what could we do in the crime scene. So I've had this idea for a number of years, and my colleague at UWE did create a virtual world using something called Second Life. And the students described it as a little Marmite. They either loved it or they hated it, and it's where you create an avatar and you have this avatar and you move around the room. And the room that was designed at UE, and it was based on all of our rooms in the crime scene house that we have in our facility over in UWE. And they found it quite clunky because it was very, very difficult to move around the room. And myself, having children of a certain age, they were all into this sort of VR, putting headsets on. I thought that'd be fantastic. Would that be if we could create a virtual crime scene for our students to have a go at? Something that's a little bit more realistic, where you're actually moving your hands and that enables you to move around the room. So we decided, myself and Richard, I approached Richard and asked him if he could help me design something related to teaching and learning so that our students could practice in a real world environment. So we have, next slide please, Rich. We have a crime scene facility at our Glenside campus, which is a beautiful, Grade 2 listed building, and it has a number of rooms we can use. So we have a briefing room, we have a living room which we use quite a lot because it's on the downstairs and it's quite a big room. Upstairs, it's got a bathroom that we utilise, a children's bedroom, a master bedroom and a study also. So I asked Rich if he could look at some photographs of the crime scene room, mainly the living room, and to be able to develop a virtual world or virtual room based on just these images. So I'm going to pass over to Rich. He's going to talk a little bit about technology.
Thank you very much, Helen. Sorry, finding my unmute button there. So yeah, we started to look at VR, and we opted on a technology known as the Oculus Quest. So VR is very much in its infancy, and we may have all seen these sort of big black boxes you strap to the front of your head. We've got two images on the right hand side here. The lower one, it's got a cable coming off, and you've got the little eye lenses inside, a big strap around the back of your head. This is what we'd expect to see. This is getting a bit antiquated though. This kind of thing is sort of sometimes poorly tolerated, because having cables and big heavy projection equipment and things, just not ideal for sort of teaching and learning scenarios. So we opted on this much newer technology called the Oculus Quest. We have an image of this, which is the top one on the right, and this is all completely self-contained. So we've got no cables or anything like that. We've got no laser arrays in the corner of the room to work out where you are. Instead, we've just got this little device. It's got a battery, it's got all the graphics units inside, and you can see in the corners it's got these 4 cameras, and they work out where you are in the room, and they do your positional tracking. Okay, so it always knows where you are. When you get to the edge of your play space, it gives you a warning. The device is also full of accelerometers, so it's able to pick up on all 6 degrees of freedom of movement. These are illustrated at the bottom of the screen here. So essentially, if your head or your body moves, then your avatar in the virtual world moves with you. You get full 3D vision through the 2 eye lenses, and this is projected at 60 frames per second. So that's the rate at which the screen updates. This all sort of combines together to give you a really good, authentic experience where it's basically designed to trick your brain into thinking that this is a real, authentic experience. In addition to sort of moving around your play space by walking or jumping, any movement you like, really, you've also got these 2 positionally tracked controllers, which we've got a picture of on the screen. And these work a bit like an Xbox controller, okay? It's exactly the same, only it's split between your 2 hands. And these are also positionally tracked. So your headset will know where they are relative to your head. We designed the software using an engine called Unity, and I've got a screen grab of the software here on the screen. So Unity is quite a nice engine to work with in this environment. It gives you what we call a WYSIWYG editor. What you see is what you get. So you get this lovely 3D view in the middle of the screen. So you get a drag and drop your assets, and by assets I mean 3D models or effects, anything that you might want to program in. And you get to sort of see what you're doing with them rather than doing everything in a code-based environment. On the left-hand side of the screen and on the bottom, we've got various different consoles for interacting with our assets. However, you do also have a scripting environment if you like to code as well. So, for example, here I've double-clicked on, I believe, the table, and on the right-hand side of the window, we've got the code inspector, where we've got an interface for the C# programming language, and this is where we get to program in attributes to our assets, things like collision, so that you can't walk through tables, and again, just make it seem a bit more authentic. If anybody's really techie minded, this is all built on top of a C++ runtime, so it's native on Windows, it's super fast. And this was built using the Oculus API. So all the programming tools that you need for interacting with the Oculus hardware are free to use, or at least they are. They were at the time of making this. I believe Facebook has since bought the technology, and they may be changing this in the future. So that's something to watch. Okay, we're now going to give you a demonstration of our virtual crime scene app. I'm going to pass you over to Helen now, who's going to be describing it. Please bear with us for 2 seconds while I swap over the video source.
Thank you, Rich. So you can see there from Rich's images that he's shown you that the images that I gave him to work with have been quite well represented in terms of the crime scene room. And we wanted to do this to give the students some sort of familiarity so that when they actually do enter the crime scene room to do their practice and their assessments, they are able to relate to what we've shown them in the virtual world. And you can see there Rich has got his gloves on, and he's showing you how he can move his hands around. So the students would originally go into the room, and first of all you do sort of a 360, looking around the room. So you can show them how you can move your head and show, look, there's the door that he's come through, and this is the scene that students would be presented with. So the scenario is that someone has come home and they found someone has broken into their house, and there's, you know, we've been told that there's some money being on the bookshelf and it's gone missing. So if you walk forward, Rich, then, and on the table there we've got some pointy things. Those are going to be our markers for today. So we get the students initially to have a look around the room, and first of all just see if they could see anything that looked a little bit out of place. So if you want to walk towards maybe the sofa, Rich, going around the table, oh look, there's looks like something on the floor under the window there. So you go a little bit closer and we can pop that down. Oh, it looks like some broken glass. So at this point, the students wouldn't necessarily be prioritising the evidence, they're just identifying things that look out of place. So there's some broken glass there. So if you turn around a little bit, Rich, and go, oh, look, there's some red staining on the carpet in the corner. So that might be of interest. So we can then go back to the table and collect another marker and go back and place that next to what we think might be some sort of red staining, something that doesn't look quite right. So the information received then by the CSI that there was some money on the bookcase. So let's have a little bit of a wander over to the bookcase and see what we can say, taking a marker just in case there's anything on there that looks of interest. So we can see that there's an open book there, and it looks like it's been disturbed, and hiding under one of those folders there on the shelf looks like a knife. So we're going to put a marker down there because that might be of interest as well. So at this point, the students could then take a step back and think about how they're going to prioritise their evidence. And it's really easy to be able to manoeuvre things around the room. And you can see that there's some blocks there, so you can pick things up. So eventually, when they do come to collecting their items, they can pick things up, catch them, and you know, eventually ideal would be that they could photograph things and package things in the correct packaging. So this is just a little bit of a quick demonstration about how this software works and what we've managed to program thus far. And you see it's really quite intuitive and really easy to use, and actually you can do quite a lot within the scene in a very short space of time. So students would, you know, maybe book headsets and be able to practice whenever they wanted to at processing this particular crime scene. Thanks very much, Rich. Really good, wonderful. Okay, coming back to the presentation then, which is going to talk you through the findings of what we found when we did our little bit of research using some students and staff at the University of the West of England. Rich, you're on mute. The famous phrase of the year, you're on mute.
Sorry, I think yeah, we had the standard thing there of double clicking the button. Okay, so yeah, we want to present to you three main statistics about our work. We've kept the numerical content of this mercifully brief for you, but firstly, I think most people are interested when we talk about VR, first and foremost about the cost. Okay, they say, how much is this? So we costed this all up in a sort of cost benefit analysis, and we did a like-for-like comparison with a similar laboratory practical in our crime scene house. We included things like the cost of personal protective equipment, the workload bundles for lecturers and technicians, setup costs, things like this. And we found that in the financial year, or the academic year, sorry, of 2019, VR costs about half as much as a lab practical, and this is taking into account the initial setup costs. So this is quite reassuring for us. When we did our trials, we used a group of 10 of our first year students, and we gave them a nice little sort of practical demo, again mimicking the structure of one of our crime scene house demos. And we gave them a couple of activities to do, again sort of mimicking some of the assessments that they'd later be doing in the year. And they also had some questionnaires to fill in for us. We found through our questionnaires that the entire setup was really well tolerated, so we didn't see hardly any instances of people saying they didn't enjoy it. None of the student cohort reported motion sickness or any other sort of adverse effects of using VR, and only one of our staff cohort in initial tests reported on this. So the vast majority of people, yeah, they said they really enjoyed it. There were no sort of downsides observed. And finally, when we came to actually assessing the students on what they've been doing, so we had a number of learning outcomes which were related to appropriately marking evidence, taking good photos of the crime scene. We found that these forms of technologies are actually really good at supporting learning outcome attainment. So the graph on the top right shows our comparative costs, and the graph on the bottom right shows the number of learning outcomes met. So as we can see, we've got this nice right-sided distribution. The vast majority of our students met the most of, if not all, of their learning outcomes. And sort of anecdotally, that's actually a much far right distribution, a much more far right, sorry, distribution than we'd have expected to see had they been doing a similar sort of experiment in the crime scene house, although it was, of course, a small sample size. And we might expect the students who volunteered to do this to be amongst the more able ones anyway. So to conclude, we found that VR is an effective and also cost-effective adjutant to higher education courses. We're going to note the huge caveat here that this should not ever replace practical sessions. Okay, all the work that we were doing was very much building on the practical sessions that we'd expect students to be doing anyway. We also had early indications that this kind of technology might be good for less able students. So we had comments in the questionnaires, things like, oh, I didn't feel that there was a lot of pressure on me to perform, or if I messed up, I didn't feel that people were watching me doing it. So we thought that was really positive. This is also potentially really accessible for people, for example, wheelchair users. Potentially very, very simple to set up a VR environment for somebody, whereas in a crime scene house scenario, if you've got X number of other students in there, it might just be considered that this is sort of slightly easier to set up and allow students to get a bit more practice in. So we're currently looking into how useful this technology is in lockdown. So is this the sort of thing that we can roll out to students in the home environment? If they've got their own VR headsets, can we have a fleet of headsets that students can rent out and use to get proper practical experience? We're also looking at implementing more scenarios, so different crime scene rooms, and getting sort of like more in-depth and complex assessments done. So we've got a tranche of extra features we're looking at, so sort of forensic tools, step plates, that kind of thing, quality of life improvements, better picture taking, all this kind of thing. So hopefully we'll be producing some more work on this very soon. That's pretty much all I was going to say on the conclusions. Helen, was there anything else you'd like to mention, or anything I've missed?
No, I think you've covered it all pretty well there, Rich. I think that this is definitely an enhancement tool. We're not suggesting this replace practical sessions in any way. It's just the ability to give the students, as Rich has already said, the freedom to be able to try this and not worry about being judged by peers or by staff, and just giving them that experience that they need, which we know that quite a lot of way you learn is by doing. So that's really all we wanted to say. Just a few acknowledgements there to our technical team, who are absolutely superb and helped do the costing for this, all the student volunteers, and all the colleagues that took part as well in our little mini trial there. And thanks to UWE also for supporting our venture and helping us to be able to carry out this research. And we opportunity to take any questions if anyone has got any questions they'd like to ask us.
Thank you, Helen and Richard. That was absolutely fantastic. Thank you for sharing your amazing work with us, and also for when I read the paper and when it came out, I was so excited to have you come and share this with the community. So I think it's absolutely brilliant. I've got a couple of questions, and we've got some in the chat as well. So we'll start with the chat. We've got a question from Kate. Thanks, Kate. How many headsets do you have at UWE? And can you cycle all the students through this effectively, through this experience?
Shall I take this one, Helen?
Yes, you take that because you know more about what we've got available.
Sure. So we have 4 of the Oculus Quest headsets, which is like our sort of development set, and the one I was just using now is like an older model that's wired, which we didn't use for testing. So we were able to test 4 people at a time with these headsets, and each individual test took about 20 minutes. So we'd estimate that even with this small number of headsets available, we could probably scale this to an entire year group if enough resources were committed. That said, each individual player only needs about 2 square meters. So if you had a large studio, I can imagine you could probably get an awful lot more people doing this at once. As mentioned, they're completely wireless. You don't need a computer it's connected to or anything. So as long as the software is being pre-installed, the sky's the limit really on the number of people who can be using this at once.
Thank you, that's brilliant. I've got a follow-up question to that, if I may. So when the students use the equipment, do they have to go to a set location to do the virtual reality experience to access the crime scene scenario? Or is it something they could potentially do in their home environment and access the scene from there?
So as it currently stands, there's no requirement for the student to be on campus. We could envisage something where we have 10, 20, 30 headsets on campus. We build the software and then give it to our users and say, go away, use this to your heart's content. The main reason that we did it in a studio to begin with was, well, we luckily managed to get the testing done just before lockdown hit. And we wanted to make sure that proper health and safety was being observed. So we didn't want people sort of colliding with each other when they've all got their headsets on, because they don't know where each other are. So we had sort of boxed out locations on the floor. But no, there's no reason necessarily that students would have to do it in that environment. They could borrow a headset, take it home and use it. We've also, one of our reviewers on the paper also asked us, oh, could students with their own VR headset use this? The answer to that at the moment is no, unfortunately, because the software, the way we've developed it, it's not sort of available for public consumption. You do sort of need somebody to build the software in developer mode, which we don't consider to be sort of common knowledge skills at this stage.
Yeah, oh, that's really helpful. Thank you. And so I guess in the headset, the software is built into it. So so when the students book out the equipment, the controllers and the headset, they've got everything they need inbuilt. So it's quite easy to use.
Exactly right. Yeah, so I mean, the standalone headsets, it is literally a smartphone inside the box. It works just like any sort of smartphone in that it runs an Android operating system. What users normally have to do is log into it with like either a personal account or an institutional account. They'll do that via Bluetooth from their phone or their tablet or their laptop. In the sort of like student use mode, that's absolutely fine. They log in and then you get a lovely dashboard. You click on crime scene app, off you go. Very, very user friendly. Building it is slightly more involved than that, but it's still essentially the same process.
That's brilliant. And we've just got another question in the chat. Did you log the actions taken by the students in the VR environment, and how would the evaluation by the tutor go? And did you implement live view for an audience without headsets, for example, or I suppose to share the experience with other students in the cohort?
Sure. So we didn't implement live view. That's not a feature of the wireless headsets, unfortunately. They don't quite have the processing ability for that. In terms of assessing the learning outcomes, Helen, would you like to speak a little bit about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So we put together a little questionnaire to sort of capture what the students did within that environment. So it was asking them what they did first, what their thoughts were, how they processed things. So it was getting students really to reflect on how they think they did, and by doing that we could capture their movements in and around the crime scene.
Oh, so really useful for reflection and helping them develop this. Oh, that's fantastic. And we've got one more question. Lorna, thanks Lorna. Thank you, Helen and Richard. So everyone's really impressed. What other scenarios will you be looking to develop moving forward?
So I can talk a little bit about this and then I'll pass back to Rich. So ideally we'd like to create more crime scenes relating to the crime scene facilities that we have, in order for that familiarity for the students, but then maybe making them a little bit more complex, a little bit more involved for our sort of level, 6 and 7 students, making them maybe more complex, the things that you couldn't necessarily set up and clean up very quickly. Rich, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thanks, Helen. Not much to add to that really, other than just to say I'm really interested in how accessible we can make these technologies. So this isn't something we've put a lot of time into as of yet, but we'd really like to see how we can make this accessible for everybody. So I mean, we mentioned that one person in our cohort of 20 total people experienced motion sickness. We think that this is associated with the fact that they are partially deaf. So we're going to have a good hard think about how we're going to make this like a useful technology for literally everybody who's going to be using it.
Well, it's such a fantastic inclusive resource. So many congratulations again, and thank you for presenting and sharing your practice with us. We feel very fortunate for you to take the time today. So thank you both. And I'm sure you'll get lots of interest from our attendees today, but also people watching the recording later on YouTube. So thank you both once again from all of us at Remote Forensic CSI.
Thanks for inviting us. We really enjoyed presenting it. Thank you.
So, oh, we've got one more comment in the chat. Oh, that's really interesting, Lorna. Lorna's looking at motion sickness. So Lorna, I don't know if Richard's still here. Lorna, who's in the chat, just left a comment. She'd like to have a comment, chat with you, Richard, about reducing motion sickness in technology. So that's a possible collaboration there moving forward.
Absolutely, yeah. Please do send me an email. Yeah, we've got lots of things in the works. Sort of taking away people's peripheral vision is the only thing we looked at in this study for during movement. That's apparently something that gets well tolerated. But yeah, really looking forward to having a chat about that.
Thank you.
Okay, so thank you to Helen and to Richard. That was a really exciting and interesting insight into the work that they've been doing with their students. So